It's almost like living in two worlds simultaneously. On the one hand, we imagine that we're living inside of a defined world, right? Like I'm sitting in a room. That's a definition. Everything about that sentence is a definition. I am sitting in a room. Each part of that, right, is a way of defining what's here. And it's not that that's untrue from within that definitional vantage, that perspective. But it's almost like in that world, it's like living inside of a dictionary. But we're not merely living inside of a dictionary, we're living inside of an actual reality that can't ultimately be defined, which is really quite something to like really let that. I mean, I say that a lot. I say it all the time. It's mostly what I say, that this is beyond description, this reality, this experiencing. But we are so accustomed to imagining that we live inside of the definitional frames of reference that we all know quite well. But we have this opportunity to look, to investigate, just in a very easy, light, curious way, what the definitions are made of, what the apparently described world actually consists of. You could say what, in the same way that the material world that we think of existing is comprised of, you know, certain building blocks, fundamental building blocks, right? Molecules and atoms and subatomic particles and quarks, and the building blocks, the foundational elements that make up the physical world, the material world, right? Well, if I could describe my experience of I am sitting in a room, again, that's the kind of definitional perspective. But what are the building blocks of each part of that description? I mean, we could start at the very heart and center, you could say, of that phrase, I'm sitting in a room. That word I is a definition, isn't it? It's a frame of reference. Something's being described with that word. What is that? And you could say you're sitting in your room, you know, first person, you know, I'm sitting in my room or wherever you're sitting. Some may be outdoors. Well, what is the I actually referring to? What are the building blocks of you? Where are you? Where's the I actually located? I mean, most things that well, pretty much everything that we name and describe, you know, certainly in the world of objects has some location that's, we could see it, there it is, there's the glass sitting over there, it has a location, I can point to it, right? Where does the location of I? Where does I? Where is the I? Can you find it somewhere? It's kind of a simple question, isn't it? But it's a profound question. Where is it located? Can you actually find it? Where are the, when we name something, the implication, of course, is that its definition, in this case, I, the boundaries of that definition, the limits of I are, how we're distinguishing that which we've named from everything that's not I, right? So we create a limit. That's what the definition does around, well, what this is I versus not I, right? Otherwise, how can we name it? In a sense, the I seems to be standing out as something separate from its context, just like any other object that we might name or phenomena that we might name. But what actually is the boundary of I? It's very much the same question in a way as what is its location? If you feel the sense of being that you might feel, that's I, the sense of being, existence, right? What is that? What is that feeling of I? That feeling of beingness, of aliveness? What is it? What is it made of? What is it composed of? Those are questions to feel your way into the answer rather than think your way into the answer. Because any idea we might come up with to say, oh, well, I am this set of personality characteristics, then that begs the question, well, what are those made of, right? Or I am the body, well, what is the body made of? The body's made up of these sensations. What are the sensations made of? You see, that's the nature of this kind of inquiry is, let's get to the bottom of what it is. Like, what is it? What is the I? When I say I'm sitting here, I'm seeing a computer screen. What is sitting here? Here's you could call it kind of a bubble of experiencing. A bubble that has no findable edges to it. So probably bubble isn't the right word for it, but There's no, there's no point where the bubble comes to an end. But is there actually some definable, identifiable, circumscribable, delineatable I at the center of the bubble of experience? Was there just a bubble of experience? We say just with language, right? I'm having thoughts. I'm having a feeling. Like I feel this way. Or I'm hearing. I'm seeing. I'm sitting. The I just keeps getting reintroduced into the center, presumably this presumed subject at the center of all of this. But in the field of experience itself, this flow of experiencing, tell me, do you actually find that circumscribed center called the self, called the I? Do you? Can you find it? If you feel I for a moment as the sense of beingness, the sense of existing, right? That sense of being alive, sense of being present here. And then say, look, I'm looking at my computer screen, right? And it's also present as a object appearing, right? So there's the beingness, the existence of I, of the beingness, me, I think of as me. And then there's the beingness of things that are appearing, computer screens, people on the computer screens, right? But can you feel the way in which the sense of beingness, the sense of presence of what is, the presence of being, is just a continuum? In other words, I feel the sense of beingness, and if I literally, like, even spatially, if I go out to the beingness of what's appearing in the environment, I just meet more beingness. I just find more existence, more appearing. So there's the presumed self at the center of it all appearing, and then there's the appearance of all these objects. But experientially, there's just appearing that's just a continuum of appearing. It's not like there's the appearance of a self at the center, and then there's a nice clean delineation, a gap, and then the appearance of the world of objects and phenomena, both internal and external. It's not like that. It's just appearing. And feel what that's like to recognize that perspective. of the continuum of appearing, the continuum of being. The indivisible nature of being. In that sense, if you're anything, if we are anything, it's everything that's appearing. We're the entirety of the appearance, which is all there is. The entirety of what's appearing. But what we have a tendency, or consciousness has a tendency to just pick out an aspect of the appearance and label that as I. That's what it does. It separates, it pulls it out of the field of appearing as if it somehow has an autonomous existence as a separate appearance. You pluck it out of the field of appearing, like you might pluck a wave out of the sea and say it has an independent existence from the sea, which of course it doesn't. It's very interesting, again, I love that metaphor of the sea because it's literally like one thing that can be looked at in two ways. But when you look at it from the perspective of you can't pluck the wave out of the sea and distinguish it from the sea, that's a totally arbitrary delineation that you're making. How do you pluck the wave out of the sea? How do you do that? You can't actually do it. And yet it is one way the seamless nature of reality can be viewed as separate appearances, right? As the computer that's appearing is separate from the glass that's appearing and the cell phone that's on the table and this presumed one who's looking at all of this. That's very much like pulling the waves out of the sea and going, there's a wave. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And it isn't wrong to see it from that vantage of separate pieces appearing, because it, in a sense, reality looks like that. It's one of the ways it looks. It looks like separate pieces. It can look like separate pieces, right? And we're all very familiar with it looking like that. But it can also be seen as one seamless appearance, one continuous appearance, where no clear edge between this and that can be found. And in that sense, there's not a this or a that from that vantage. There's just this appearance that can look like this and that. It can look like many parts. It can look like a subject perceiving objects. But it can also be encountered like I'm describing now, or attempting to describe, which is just pure indivisibility as far as the eye can see. It's interesting, and I often say this too, like to feel your way into this as a felt sense, because as you feel this flow of experiencing, feel your way through the field of your experience. And as you move through it in a felt sense sort of way, I mean, this is just kind of poetry. I mean, it's not exactly like this, but if you feel your way through the field of experience, you're moving through the field of experience as a felt sense. You don't arrive at a place where somehow you hit a wall, do you? It's just absolutely open-ended and indivisible and without walls, without gaps. You have the sense of that? there's like a quality of in that, from that felt sense perspective of smoothness, the smoothness of this seamlessness, this continuum. Because there's not things bumping up against each other. There's not separate pieces, you know, there's not separate pieces. It's just this pristine, pure singularity, one thing, one non-thing thing, because you can't pin down what the thing is that I'm saying is one thing. It's not really a thing, it's a pure, boundless mystery. When I asked earlier, you know, what is anything made of? What is this, the I made of in that sentence? I am sitting here. What is sitting made of? What is the room made of? And you drill down experientially into each apparent piece of this field of reality, and you arrive at the same place, which is it's made of inconceivability. Which is really extraordinary when you consider that we assume, because we have language and concepts, that we know where we are, that we know what's going on, right? That we know what we are in a sense, and that we know what the phenomena we're encountering are. But this inquiry, this experiential inquiry, is calling that into question, to put it mildly. And so from what I'm essentially, you know, pointing to here is that this idea of the transcendent, which we hear in spiritual traditions, is not actually something that's somewhere else other than the non-transcendent. It's the transcendent is right here as your ordinary experience is the transcendent. Your so-called ordinary experience is pure transcendental boundlessness. I mean, you know, taking a sip of water. Every, you know, again, that's another sentence, you know, I took a sip of water. And I could just, it's like every single word in that sentence is infinity, 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 infinity. The I, the sipping, the water, the glass. That can look like a bunch of parts in interaction with one another, right? It can definitely look like that and be experienced in that way. And just, that's a beautiful thing as well. Maybe that's, you know, maybe dangerously waxing metaphysical here, but which I don't tend to do, but maybe the singular, a whole nature of this has to seemingly split itself into pieces and parts in order to encounter itself, right? In order to have a relationship with itself. In a way, that sense of otherness, which is what the split is, the split between perceiver and perceived, that there's something other that could then be encountered, like the sound of my voice can be encountered by you as something other than you, right? That then you get to encounter this, the flavor of my voice and the words and the meaning behind them and whatever else might be, you know, contained, if you will, or transmitted by these sounds that are being made. Yeah, it's like, you know, or you could say maybe a little more poetically, it's like the one, you know, seemingly splits itself into twos so that it can dance with itself. Because how do you dance? The dance, now you have a dance, now you have something to move with, something to interact with, seemingly, right? But again, it's paradox as far as we can, everywhere we look, we find this paradox that I'm having a conversation with a number of wonderful people, and from the vantage of one field of appearing that's appearing, I'm just having a relationship with myself, because there's just myself. There's just reality dancing with itself. It's like, go back to the ocean and the waves. So there's a sea, a blustery sea, and it's making waves, which it does, right? And there's one wave that's like dancing with another wave, crashing into another wave, merging with another wave, colliding with another wave. And reality can be seen that way, experienced that way, in a sense. And then from that perspective of there not being waves, separate waves, there's just an ocean doing what it does, moving in the ways that it does, apparently. There's not one thing interacting with another thing, is there? Not actually. When we're encountering the various you could say psychological phenomena we encounter, the mental emotional states we encounter, where we feel like, oh my God, I'm dealing with this state of mind, my busy mind that I don't like, my chaotic mind, or my disturbed emotional states. From this perspective of feeling that there's just appearances dancing with appearances, there's just an appearing dancing with itself, there's just experiencing dancing with itself. Play around with that and see how differently those mental emotional states, with the sense of them, it's just a completely different way to encounter those. Very different. Where you're not really interjecting the I, you're seeing that the supposed I at the center of those disturbing mental emotional states can't be found. And then it's really interesting, like, how can they represent a problem when there's not someone at the center of them in relationship to them, right?